Hi everyone, welcome back to the Mind Matter channel. Today we are going to explore the working memory model developed by psychologists Alan Baddeley and Graham Hitch in 1974. This model explains how our brain temporarily hold and process information when we are doing tasks like reading, solving problems, or having a conversation. Let's break it down in a simple way. Baddeley and Hitch, 1974, as I previously mentioned, proposed a multi-component working memory model. So they mentioned that memory is active, not just a storage. Include processing and manipulating information. So it's just processing and manipulating the information. They replace the idea of single STM, short-term memory. So it's because of they just found the short-term memory have lots of the components and lots of work than the multi-store model, where the Atkinson and Shiffrin introduced. So they thought like it has a different component. What is working memory? Working memory is like the brain's mental workplace. Instead of just storing information briefly, it actively processes information. For example, when you try to calculate a sum in your head or follow directions while walking somewhere, you are using working memory. Baddeley and Hitch proposed that working memory is made up of multiple components, each with its own role. As I previously mentioned, Baddeley and Hitch mentioned that this has, like working memory has, the four main important component, which is central executive, episodic buffer, and visuals, spatial sketchpad, and phonological loop. So the Baddeley's model or working memory model has these things as I previously mentioned it, and so the central executive and visual spatial sketchpad and phonological loop and episodic buffer. The episodic buffer was introduced to the 2000. So then after that, the information are just passed to long-term memory. Okay. So the understanding the multi-component system short-term memory is like a working memory. Of course, working memory is active part. It's actually active part of short. It's normally compared with other component. This is the active part. It's crucial for learning and reasoning and comprehension. Like it's really important. The working memory is really important to learn, isn't it? And also reasoning and comprehensions, isn't it? Every day-to-day life, we need working memory. It's really important for working memory, isn't it? So the early models were too simple. The early model is just explained too simply. So Baddeley's model is a little bit, more interesting way. And also they have, Baddeley introduced the four component. So it's really important to know about the four, the components of working memory. Central executive act as a boss, and the phonological loop is responsible for sound and the language based information, and visual spatial sketchpad is like a visual and spatial, the information you get, and also episodic buffer is added in 2000. It integrates and links to long-term memory. We can see the central executive. The central executive is the first component is the central executive. This is the control system of working memory. It doesn't store information itself, but instead directs attention and coordinates the other components. For example, it decided whether you focus on listening to a lecture or writing notes. So it's not get the information, but it's just controls which one we need to do first, which one we need to do second. So it's coordinate slave system, and also it doesn't have storage. So like a manager allocating resources, and it has limited capacity. So it's a controlling. It's kind of act as a manager, okay, controlling you. The next one is phonological loop. You can see the phonological loop. It has two parts. One is the phonological store. The other one is articulatory control process. The phonological store is which hold the spoken words for a few seconds. So it's just sound based, like, hold the spoken words for 2 seconds, a few seconds. And the articulatory rehearsal process is which repeat the information so we don't forget it. It's repeat the information ourselves. Any important information, we need to repeat it on the second or few minutes. Then the articulatory control process is helping to do that. That is called, for example, key functions like language-based tasks like reading or remembering phone numbers, right? For example, when you repeat a phone number to yourself until you dial it, so that is, of course, articulatory control process, like inner voice. We just, repeat ourselves, right? So this component, I think phonological loop, this component is responsible for processing sound-based information. Research suggests that there are two subcomponents of the phonological loop. So I just show you lip because it's articulatory control process. This component is also known as the inner voice because it rehearses verbal sounds. This helps us to prepare speech and think in words. The capacity of inner voice is determined by how long it takes to say something and not simply by the number of items. This is seen by something called the word length effect. The amount you can recall decreases the more time it takes to say a word. Phonological store is known as the inner ear because it receives and stores sounds. Its focus is on speech perceptions. If we keep rehearsing these sounds in our head, we can keep it in the phonological store. Our next component is visual spatial sketchpad. This is known as your inner eye. That's what you can see the image. This is responsible for visual information, what we see or what an object might look like. You see the object in your mind's eye. It also includes spatial information which relate to the location of subjects in the space. It helps us to know where things are in relation to one another. So, the visual spatial sketchpad stores and process visual and spatial information. This is what help you remember things like the layout of room, direction on a map, or where you parked your car. So these are the things are maneuver this visual spatial sketchpad, right? So inner eye. So now we are going to see the episodic buffer. In 2000, Alan Baddeley added fourth component called the episodic buffer because before 2000 the episodic buffer did not add by Alan Baddeley. So in 2000 Alan Baddeley added a fourth component called the episodic buffer, right? This component integrates information from different sources including long-term memory and combines visual, spatial and verbal information into a single episode. For example, remembering a story you just heard while picturing the events in your mind. Like when you remember for example, you watch film, then you remember that film and you are picturing those film in your mind. So these type of things are, the episodic buffer is doing it, okay? You can see that one in the picture. This is the episodic buffer. Then these are just, everything, all the information comes here, and this is integrates all the information and then send it to long term, and from the long term then it's just processing all the information and then again uh, you know remembering those informations. The information can be visual or the visual or word or voice or whatever, right? So this episodic buffer is acting as a bridge, okay? And also it has a limited capacity, okay? I have shown this picture here. So in 2000, Alan Baddeley added fourth component, the episodic buffer. You can see the brain and how this, the phonological loop and visual spatial sketchpad and the long-term memory, all the informations are just, integrates all the information here for episodic buffer. And then it's just like, remembering a story while picturing even in mind, then make it as a combine and organize the information into one episode. Okay, so this is the main, you can think about the bridge and integrate all the components and then remembering the story, picturing even the, make it as a one episodes. So when you evaluate the working memory, so we can take the cave studies. So you already know cave studies. Maybe you can watch in the YouTube about working memory and uh, cave studies and evidenced against the multi-store model. But this time we can use this evidence for the working memory model to support, because of cave was involved when cave was involved a motorbike accident. Right, when the accident resulted in damage his brain, I mean short-term memory, specifically with the verbal recall. Yeah, specifically, when we ask any sentences, he can only remember two words. When tested, he was only able to recall two items verbally from short-term memory. Right? Okay. In contrast, when his short-term memory was tested for visual information, his recall was mostly unaffected. So the visual information, any memory or about the visual information, then it didn't, affected. As a result, this case study suggests that working memory may have separate component to it. One for verbal, like phonological loop, and one for visual information. So maybe the area phonological loop was affected, therefore he can only remember two words. But any visual information, it didn't affect it because he can recall it. So this suggests that working memory, I mean, has a different component. When you see the weakness of this, the Baddeley Hitch working memory, because uh, central executive is vague, because not well defined, not clearly defined about how the central executive is working, and also hard to test the component isolations. So it's really hard to test the component isolations. I mean, and also it's all simplifies the complexity of memory system. Like it's just like giving a specific definitions allow to think about, allow to just allow us to think about. It's not easy to understand the memory, isn't it? So therefore it oversimplifies the complexity of memory system. So the everyday example of the central executive include, so for example, how the central executive is working. uh, so we can just give this one as a answer, like deciding to ignore your phone when it rings so you can finish an important task. Like, so central executive is controlling us to do things, okay? And also prioritizing tasks by choosing answer urgent, like emails first and leaving less important ones for later. And also multitasking, like such as cooking dinner while helping your child to do the homework. And also the next one is switching attention from watching TV to listening to someone speaking. So these type of things are just controlling by the central executive, according to Baddeley's Hitch. So you can just give the 16 marks questions about briefly evaluate the working model of memory. So in this case, you have to just introduce the year of the working memory introduced, why the working memory introduced, before that what is the model, and then you have to just draw the picture maybe, and then you have to introduce uh, the describe the the four component of the working memory, and then you have to just evaluate the strength of the working memory, and also you have to introduce case studies support the working memory model, and also you have to mention the weakness of the working memory model. So it's really very easy if you structure and if you learn about this, and it's very easy to answer the question. Thank you for watching my video clip. So I hope you might understand the working memory model, Baddeley's Hitch working memory model. I'll just come with the other brand new clip with you. Thank you.